and those responsible had miscalculated one thing: humanity's resolve. Across the galaxy, the revelation sent shockwaves. Traders, scientists, politicians, and soldiers alike paused to absorb the implications. A force thought, long defeated, the Shadow Empire was active again, and it had dared to strike at the heart of humanity. Yet in striking, it had awakened a species that would not rest. Humanity was no longer a passive participant in galactic politics. They were a reckoning. Admiral Voss gave her final orders: expose, pursue, and neutralize. Terran fleets moved with precision. Hidden bases were destroyed. Networks were dismantled. Every strike sent a message to those who had thought themselves safe in shadows. The humans would find you, and you would face consequences. And then came the public reveal. Humanity broadcast the evidence across the stars. Every world could see the connections, the manipulations, and the deliberate attempt to kill Elias Kor. It was a revelation that combined sorrow and fury. For the first time, billions across, the galaxy understood what had truly happened. The Shadow Empire responded with defiance. They laughed in the belief that the galaxy was too fractured to act, that their secret would shield them. But they had forgotten who they had crossed. From Earth, a statement was sent to every system. You struck at peace. You killed a diplomat whose only crime was hope. Humanity will not forgive. Humanity will not rest. The galaxy must choose: side with justice or face the consequences of standing with shadows. Elias Kor's death will not be forgotten, and those responsible will be held accountable. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of entire worlds. Every human fleet, every colony, every soldier was aligned with the same purpose: justice for Elias Kor, and an unbreakable warning to the galaxy. On distant planets, ordinary citizens watched the broadcast with awe. They had seen human fleets, heard their warnings, and now understood their discipline and resolve. Humanity was no longer a young, hopeful species. It was a force that combined intelligence, strategy, and emotion into a power that could not be ignored. Even in hiding, the leaders of the Shadow Empire began to fear. They realized that their web of secrecy had been penetrated, their influence stripped, and their safety gone. They had underestimated humans, assuming that grief would weaken them. Instead, grief had become clarity, sorrow had become strategy, loss had become unstoppable action. The galaxy now knew two truths about humanity. They were relentless, and they were united. A man of peace had been assassinated. The humans had uncovered the truth, and now the reckoning had begun. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the stars that would soon bear witness to humanity's promise. "We will not stop," she said quietly, but every crew member heard her. They did not need orders beyond that. Every heart aboard, every mind, every hand was ready to act. Humanity's path was clear, and their purpose unshakable. For Elias Kor, for peace, for the galaxy itself, the humans had become a storm that could not be outrun, hidden, or denied, and the universe would never forget the day that the Shadow Empire had awakened the wrath of mankind. The galaxy had learned too late what humanity truly was. They had killed a man of peace, and in return they had awakened a force no empire, no council, no shadowy syndicate could control. Humanity did not stop. Humanity did not forgive. Humanity did not retreat. Terran fleets surged through the void, like a tidal wave. Worlds that had once doubted Earth's resolve now found themselves in the path of disciplined, relentless power. Every strike was deliberate, every maneuver precise. The humans moved not with rage alone, but with purpose, with intelligence, and with unity. On the bridge of the flagship Resolute, Admiral Lyra Voss surveyed the battlefield. Stars flashed past as fleets coordinated across light years, striking enemy outposts, disrupting communications, and cutting supply lines. She felt the weight of every human life behind her: the farmers, miners, engineers, soldiers, children, all tied together by one common truth: Elias Kor had died. and humanity had promised that peace would not be struck down without consequence. The Shadow Empire, once hidden and untouchable, began to crumble. Its leaders scrambled to flee. Its operatives were captured or neutralized, and its influence evaporated. They had believed that a young species could be intimidated, that humans would mourn quietly and then forget. They had miscalculated. Humanity never forgot. Humanity never forgave. Across countless worlds, fear spread. Not blind panic, but a deep, intelligent fear, the kind that comes from witnessing something unstoppable. Governments scrambled to protect themselves. Mercenary fleets withdrew. Even those who had once opposed humans cautiously approached with offers of neutrality or alliance. The galaxy had discovered the hard truth. Humans did not fight for conquest. They fought for justice, and they never stopped until justice was served. In the colonies, ordinary humans felt the weight of history upon their shoulders. In the streets of Mars, children drew pictures of Elias Core and hung them in their windows. On Titan, miners paused in their work to watch the broadcasts, listening to the messages from the High Command. And on Earth, millions raised their voices together, a single song of remembrance, honor, and promise. The Terran High Command addressed the galaxy once more. Every star system received the broadcast. We gave you peace. We gave you hope. You struck at it and killed the man who carried it. We will not allow such acts to go unpunished. Humanity will act. Humanity will endure. Humanity will remind the galaxy that the cost of striking at peace is war without end. The words were simple, yet their impact was immeasurable. Humans did not threaten with empty rhetoric. They acted with the history of their species behind them, centuries of survival, struggle, and resilience. Every planet, every system, every soldier and citizen understood that this was more than retaliation. This was a promise forged in grief and strengthened by purpose. Even in the darkest corners of the galaxy where the Shadow Empire had once ruled, whispers spread of a species that could not be broken. Humans could endure impossible losses, rise stronger, and unite with a force that no diplomacy, no weapon, no cunning could resist. Soldiers on the front lines felt it too. Pilots carried portraits of Elias Core into battle. Engineers worked tirelessly to ensure every weapon, every shield, every ship performed flawlessly. They did not act out of hate. They acted out of loyalty, justice, and the memory of a man who had believed in peace. The galaxy watched as the humans advanced, unstoppable, and understood another terrifying truth. This was only the beginning. Humanity had declared war not for domination, not for conquest, but to uphold their honor and the values Elias Core had embodied. And in doing so, they had become a force that could not be contained. Leaders of other species began to adjust their strategies. Some sought alliances with humanity. Some quietly withdrew from conflict. Few dared to oppose them openly. The galaxy was reshaping itself around human power, influence, and resolve. The death of a diplomat had changed everything. On Earth, the people understood what had been achieved, yet they knew the path ahead would be long. The war had only begun, and it might last for generations. But they did not falter. Their unity, their strength, and their unyielding will ensured that humanity would endure, that the promise of Elias Core would live on, and that the galaxy would never forget the cost of striking at peace. In the council halls, diplomats whispered in fear. In secret chambers, empires plotted quietly, hoping to survive the storm. But humanity did not stop. Humanity did not rest. Humanity had given the galaxy a truth it could not deny. A species that fights for its values, for its people, and for peace itself can never be defeated. The stars seemed to burn a little brighter as human fleets surged across the void. Their war was righteous, their purpose undeniable, and their resolve unbreakable. Every world that witnessed their rise understood that the galaxy had changed forever. And above it all, in the minds of every human, echoed a single promise. Elias Core had died. Humanity would act. The galaxy would remember. War without end had begun, and humanity would endure. Solve. We will remember Elias Core, and we will act until the end of this war." The council chamber fell into stunned silence. For a moment, even the most hardened delegates understood the truth. They were witnessing the rise of a species that refused compromise when its values were violated. They were witnessing humanity stepping fully into the galaxy's stage, and they were terrified. Outside the chamber, whispers spread across star systems. Merchants, miners, soldiers, and ordinary citizens spoke of humans as a force unlike any other. A young pilot on Titan whispered to her sister, "The humans, they are not like anyone else. When they fight, it is for something greater than victory. They fight for justice. And justice, the galaxy would soon learn, could be far more dangerous than any weapon." Even as divisions hardened within the council, humans acted with precision. Their fleets were not chaotic. Their strikes were not random. Each action carried meaning, intention, and consequence. The galaxy could debate endlessly, but it could not stop them. The council was no longer united. Old alliances fractured. New fears took root. Some races quietly began preparing their defenses, while others sought secret negotiations with humanity, hoping to avoid the fire they had seen. And all the while, humanity moved forward. Grief had been transformed into purpose. Fury had become discipline. Loss had become a weapon. The galaxy had killed a man of peace, and in response, humanity had revealed its true nature: relentless, united, and unstoppable. For the first time in history, the Council understood a terrifying truth. The humans had awoken, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy had begun to tremble, not from storms or supernovas, but from the relentless will of humanity. In every corner of space, whispers spread like wildfire. The humans had struck. They had acted with precision, efficiency, and a kind of cold fury that could not be denied. And the galaxy realized with growing unease that this was only the beginning. On countless worlds, leaders held emergency councils. Some hid in panic, ordering defensive fleets and constructing emergency fortifications. Others sought secret negotiations with Earth, hoping to find favor and avoid destruction. Even those who had once dismissed humans as emotional and chaotic now watched with fear. They were discovering the truth that many had overlooked. Human emotion was not weakness. It was fuel. Every grief, every loss, every betrayal could become a storm, and the humans had learned to channel it into power beyond comprehension. In the orbital stations of the outer colonies, Terran fleets maintained constant vigilance. Human soldiers moved with unshakable discipline. Each pilot, each engineer, each captain carried the same message: we do not forgive, and we do not forget. Portraits of Elias Core adorned every control room, reminding the crew why they fought, why they endured, why they had no choice but to act. Across the galaxy, the reactions were mixed. Traders whispered of disrupted supply lines, of ships that no longer dared leave orbit for fear of sudden Terran strikes. Scientists worried that their research colonies might become targets for unknown reasons. Politicians argued endlessly about whether Earth's actions were justified, but no one questioned the consequences. Humanity's wrath was visible, measurable, and terrifying. For humans, fear did not weaken them. It sharpened them. On Earth, mothers and fathers spoke to their children about Elias Core, teaching them not only to remember his ideals, but also to understand the strength that lay within humanity. On Mars, soldiers trained with an intensity that bordered on obsession, repeating drills and scenarios until instinct became action. And in distant stations, pilots adjusted their maneuvers, calculated trajectories, and studied the galaxy with the precision of mathematicians, each act a tribute to the man whose death had ignited this inferno. Even the humans themselves felt the gravity of their actions. They mourned Elias Core, yes, but they also took pride in the unity of their response. Their grief had become a weapon, their sorrow a strategy. They were not motivated by mindless revenge. They were motivated by honor, loyalty, and the principle that one could not strike at peace without consequences. The other civilizations began to notice patterns they had never seen before. Every strike was measured, targeted, and efficient. No unnecessary destruction, no random acts of cruelty. The humans did not attack for conquest. They attacked to send a message. And the message was clear. Harm humanity, and you will face a storm that cannot be stopped. Across the council, debates continued in vain. Some factions urged restraint, others called for immediate military action. But the truth was becoming undeniable. Humanity could not be bargained with, could not be intimidated, and could not be ignored. They were no longer a participant in the council's fragile balance. They were a force rewriting the rules of the galaxy. On remote planets, ordinary citizens felt the weight of fear personally. Merchants hesitated to trade. Farmers worried their shipments would vanish. Children stared at the night sky and whispered to themselves, "The humans, they are unstoppable." And in those whispers lay the universal understanding that humanity's rise was inevitable. Even the shadows of the galaxy, the criminal syndicates, hidden empires, and rogue warlords felt the humans' growing power. Where once they had operated, with near impunity, now Terran eyes seemed to be everywhere. Their networks were disrupted, their bases destroyed, and their fear was tangible. Humanity had transformed loss into strategy, and every action reinforced the message. No one could escape accountability. Yet despite the fear, admiration began to grow. Some species, once rivals or enemies of Earth, observed humans with quiet respect. Their relentless will, their discipline, their capacity to turn grief into strength, it was astonishing. Even if they did not wish to admit it aloud, they recognized that the galaxy had never seen anything like this before. Humanity was young among the stars, but it carried a power older than empires, and in the midst of this tension, humanity continued to advance. Fleets moved with perfect synchronization. Commanders issued orders that were executed without hesitation. Soldiers and pilots acted not just out of duty but out of purpose, each aware that they carried Elias Corps' legacy into every system they entered. The galaxy had hoped that fear would be enough to slow humanity. It had not. They had underestimated the strength that loss could ignite, the fire that could rise from grief, and the unity that could form in the shadow of tragedy. Humanity did not just act. They inspired awe, dread, and a grudging respect that would never fade. And so the stars themselves seemed to shift. The galaxy had never before faced a species capable of turning sorrow into unstoppable momentum, and now it was beginning to understand. The humans were coming, and their path was clear. Justice for Elias Corps and a promise that peace once struck down would never go unanswered. Humanity's wrath was measured, deliberate, and unending. The galaxy had felt the first tremors. The first ripples of fear had become waves, and as those waves grew, the universe realized one terrifying truth. The humans were no longer simply survivors of the galaxy. They were a force of nature, a force that would never stop. Weeks passed, but the assassin remained hidden. Many in the galaxy believed he was untouchable, protected by shadows, secret networks, and unseen empires. Yet humanity did not act in haste. They acted with patience, strategy, and determination. Every investigation, every covert operation, every signal intercepted brought them closer to the truth. And the truth, when revealed, would shake the galaxy to its core. From the command bridge of the flagship Resolute, Admiral Lyra Voss studied the final pieces of intelligence. Holoscreens flickered with images of shadowy figures, encrypted transmissions, and hidden bases. Her eyes narrowed as she traced the path of the assassin, following him through corridors of secrecy across multiple star systems. Humanity had learned the lesson that grief sharpens focus, and this hunt was no exception. The evidence finally pointed to the Shadow Empire, a clandestine organization thought to be crushed centuries ago. They had been careful, patient, and ruthless. Their agents had orchestrated the assassination of Elias Corps, hoping to prevent humanity from rising as a unifying force in the galaxy. They had believed that by killing one man of peace they could strike fear into a species that many considered young and idealistic. But they had underestimated humanity. Through a series of coordinated strikes, Terran intelligence captured records, decrypted communications, and traced money flows. Every secret, Every hidden ally, every corrupt official tied to the Shadow Empire was exposed. Humanity's approach was precise. They did not destroy innocents unnecessarily. They did not act without reason. Each revelation carried weight. Each disclosure was a blow, and the galaxy watched in awe as the truth unfolded. On Zoraya Prime, the Galactic Council convened in urgent session. Holoscreens projected the evidence that the humans had uncovered. Delegates gasped as encrypted transmissions, financial trails, and secret meeting coordinates were displayed. There was no longer any doubt. The assassin had acted under the orders of a larger, shadowy power. Some tried to deny it. Some tried to shift blame. But humanity had anticipated this. Every claim, every excuse, every attempt to hide the truth was met with proof. The humans presented their case not with anger alone, but with undeniable logic, evidence, and strategy. Elias Cor's death was no random act. It was carefully planned, understanding and few with courage. The words of Earth's leaders, fueled by grief and fury, were not mere threats. They were promises, and humans kept their promises. In the silent darkness between stars, Terran fleets that had long been watchers now became hunters. Massive destroyers, sleek frigates, and agile fighter wings moved like living shadows, crossing the void with one purpose: to ensure that no one who had harmed Elias Cor would remain untouched. The first target was a syndicate, world rumored to have provided shelter to the assassin. Known for its fortified orbital defenses and labyrinthine underworld, the planet was considered untouchable by most. Yet for humans, untouchable was never a word to describe anything. Terran ships appeared in orbit as if from nowhere. The planet's sensors screamed alarms, but it was too late. Human commanders had studied the defenses for months, anticipating every possible trap, every hidden minefield, every mercenary strike. Within hours, orbital cannons were silenced, missile arrays destroyed, and the world's communications network lay in ruins. From the bridge of a human battleship, Admiral Lyra Voss watched the screens with steady eyes. She was a woman of calm, trained in logic and strategy, yet tonight her heart burned with grief as fierce as any soldier's. "Remember Elias Cor," she whispered to her crew. "We strike not for conquest. We strike for justice. Every move, precise and unyielding." Below in the cities, humans watched from screens that flickered in the darkness. The destruction was swift but targeted. Terran forces avoided civilian zones wherever possible. They struck at the structures that had allowed the assassin to hide, at the systems that had trained and armed him. They showed the galaxy that humanity's wrath was calculated, not chaotic. Across the colonies, similar operations were underway. Mars, Europa, Titan, all coordinated, all synchronized. Humans were everywhere, and yet nowhere, like shadows cast, across the stars. The message was unmistakable. No one could hide from the fury of those who had lost their voice for peace. Humanity did not shout empty threats. They acted. And when they acted, the galaxy began to feel fear. The Council on Zoraya Prime held emergency sessions debating what the Terrans would do next. Representatives argued, shouted, and pleaded for restraint, but no one could deny the truth. Humans had changed. The assassination of Elias Cor had awakened something primal and relentless in them. Some species tried to intervene diplomatically, sending messages begging for calm. "They are only reacting to grief," they said. "Let them vent. Do not escalate." But the words fell on ears that were no longer merely listening. Humans had vented. Now they were striking, and there was no pause, no hesitation, and no retreat. As Terran ships moved to their next targets, the galaxy began to see a terrifying pattern. Every world with known connections to the assassin, every base that had sheltered conspirators, every faction that had plotted against Elias Cor was hit, not indiscriminately, not cruelly, but efficiently, and the efficiency itself was a weapon. In private, some diplomats whispered that they had underestimated humanity. They had thought humans were young, emotional, idealistic. But now, they saw the opposite. Humans were disciplined, relentless, and united, and their grief, far from weakening them, had sharpened their minds and hardened their will. On the front lines, human soldiers carried portraits of Elias Kor on their armor. Fighters painted his face on their starships. Every maneuver, every strike, was a tribute to the man of peace whose death had ignited this storm. Humanity fought not for domination, but for honor, justice, and remembrance. Even the humans themselves felt the strange mix of sorrow and pride. They mourned Elias Kor with every action they took, yet each victory, each successful operation, reminded them of what he had stood for, the belief that humanity could shape the galaxy, not through fear, but through courage, determination, and unyielding resolve. And yet the galaxy was learning a hard truth. Human wrath was not bound by anger alone. It was guided by strategy, history, and purpose. Every fleet that fell, every base that collapsed, became a warning. The humans were not merely seeking revenge, they were reshaping the balance of power. By the end of the first week, entire sectors whispered about the rise of the Terran fleets. The assassin remained elusive, but the networks that had supported him crumbled. Other empires began to reconsider their alliances. Some feared that harboring enemies of humanity would bring destruction. Others marveled at the discipline of a species they had long underestimated. From Earth, the High Command issued one final message during that first week. Let it be known across every system: humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. We honor Elias Kor in the only way the galaxy will understand, by ensuring that peace cannot die without consequence. The galaxy began to take notice. Fear mixed with respect, and in that combination the seeds of something extraordinary were planted. Humanity had shown that even a species considered young among the stars could rise with unstoppable force when its values were threatened. And though the war had only just begun, one truth was clear. Wherever the humans moved, the galaxy would never be the same again. Grief had turned to fire, fire had turned to action, and the stars themselves would soon feel the weight of humanity's promise. The assassination of Elias Kor had done more than ignite humanity. It had shattered the illusion of unity in the Galactic Council. For decades, the Council had been a place of cautious diplomacy, a fragile balance of power where no species dared upset the others too strongly. Now that balance was crumbling. In the grand chamber of the Council, towering banners of countless civilizations hung like frozen echoes of pride. Delegates from hundreds of worlds sat in tense silence. For the first time in centuries, the room felt small, constrained, and heavy with fear. Every eye was on the holocom feed from Earth, every mind aware that the humans had not stopped at grief. They had moved, they had struck, and the galaxy had felt their first blows. Ambassador Thalrix of the Zorian Empire slammed his clawed hand on the council table. "We must sanction Earth immediately," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "They have declared war. Their fleets strike across the stars, and if we do nothing, all of us are at risk." A chorus of agreement followed, some voices shrill, others cautious. But not everyone agreed. Ambassador Liara of the Navari leaned forward, her long eyes calm and calculating. "We cannot ignore the context," she said softly. "The humans' diplomat was murdered. They did not attack without reason. This is retribution, and, though extreme, it carries a message the galaxy cannot afford to ignore." Murmurs of dissent rippled through the chamber. Arguments grew heated. Some species feared that siding against humanity would make them targets. Others argued that allowing humans to continue unchecked would embolden them, setting a precedent of lawlessness across the stars. Amid the chaos, the human message was clear and unwavering. Earth had not come to negotiate. They had come to act. The galaxy had killed a man of peace, and humanity would respond in kind. Outside the council chambers, the first rumors began to spread. Entire empires whispered of Terran resolve, of the precision and discipline with which the humans struck. Some whispered fearfully of their history, of ancient wars, of survival against impossible odds, of humans who never gave up, never forgot, and never forgave. Inside the council, the divide became a chasm. Delegates shouted over one another. Some called for immediate action against Earth. Others called for careful study, a diplomatic path that could prevent the humans from escalating further. A few quietly simply prayed that the humans could be reasoned with, but even they knew that reasoning with a species driven by loss and purpose was dangerous. Meanwhile, Terran fleets moved with perfect coordination. Their presence alone disrupted trade routes, alarmed distant colonies, and forced neutral systems to reconsider their alliances. No longer could the Council claim authority over humanity's actions. Humans were no longer players in their political games. They were an unstoppable force rewriting the rules. On the outer edges of the galaxy, smaller civilizations observed in horror. Worlds that had once sought to manipulate humanity as pawns now realized that they had awakened something far beyond their control. The young species of Earth had grown in power, and they had learned the harshest lesson of all. When humanity loses what it loves, it becomes something no one can predict, something no one can contain. The council debates continued, lasting hours, days, and even weeks. Proposals were made and vetoed. Alliances shifted and dissolved. Some species feared openly that supporting the humans might bring war to their doorstep, yet opposing them carried equal risk. Fear, respect, and grudging admiration intertwined, forming a web of tension that threatened to collapse at any moment. And always, hovering above the arguments and calculations, was the image of Elias Kor, the man whose death had shattered centuries of fragile trust. Every human action reminded the galaxy that this was not retaliation alone. It was the fulfillment of a promise. The galaxy had killed peace, and humanity would respond with force tempered by reason, emotion, and the relentless pursuit of justice. From Earth, the High Command broadcast a clear warning. We are not here to beg for forgiveness. We are not here to negotiate. The galaxy has acted against our people. We act in response. Let no one believe they are safe. Let no one doubt our reality. Ambassador Elias Kor was not a warrior. He did not command fleets, nor did he carry weapons. Yet in many ways he was more powerful than soldiers or generals. He was the voice of humanity in the Galactic Council, a man who believed in peace, when many others only trusted in war. Elias had a calm face that carried wisdom, and when he spoke, even the most hostile delegates leaned forward to listen. His words were simple, but they carried weight. He did not speak with arrogance, nor with the cold tone of politics. Instead, he spoke like a man who truly cared about the future. For years, his speeches had reached billions across the stars. People saw him not as just a human diplomat, but as a bridge between races. He had negotiated treaties where others had failed. He had stopped skirmishes from becoming wars. And in time, he became a symbol, proof that humanity, though young among the stars, carried something unique. Humanity carried stubborn hope. Some races admired this, others feared it. They whispered that humans, with their fierce emotions and endless determination, could one day unite the galaxy in ways no empire had ever managed. And that thought made many uneasy. On the day of his death, the council hall was brighter than ever. The marble-like floors reflected the lights of hundreds of banners. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled the chamber. Elias Kor stood at the center, ready to give a speech that many believed would change history. He spoke of unity. He spoke of ending the old grudges that had fueled wars for thousands of years. His words painted a vision of a galaxy where worlds traded freely, where soldiers became builders, and where no child would grow up fearing the shadow of war. Delegates clapped. Some stood. The broadcast spread across star systems, and in distant colonies, miners and farmers paused their work to watch him. For a moment, hope was alive, but hope is fragile. As Elias stepped down from the podium, smiling and shaking hands, it happened. A single figure pushed through the crowd. A weapon was raised, a burst of light flashed. The pulse round struck him in the chest. For 1 second, no one understood. Elias staggered, eyes wide with shock. His hand rose as if to reach for something, unseen. And then, as billions across the galaxy watched through their screens, the man of peace fell to the cold floor of the council hall. Screams erupted. Guards rushed forward. The assassin tried to flee but was cut down in an instant. Yet it was too late. The damage was done. Elias Kor was dead. The council froze. Some leaders shouted for calm, others barked orders, but nothing could cover the already weight of what had just happened. News spread faster than light. Across Earth, across Luna, across the colonies of Mars and Europa, every screen showed the same image: Elias lying lifeless on the council steps. And then silence fell. On Earth, cities dimmed their lights. In orbit, ships lowered their banners. In colonies, people gathered in silence, their voices caught in grief. They had not lost just a man. They had lost the one who had carried their dream into the stars. But grief was only the beginning. On Earth, a mother whispered to her child, "Remember his name." In the colonies, miners lifted their tools and swore they would not forget. Soldiers in distant outposts removed their helmets and stood in silence. Because humanity does not forget, and humanity does not forgive. Within hours, the Terran High Command called for an emergency address. The leaders of Earth, Luna, and the colonies stood united before the cameras. Their message was short, but it burned into history. To the Galactic Council, to the assassin, to those who harbor such crimes, we say this: if peace dies with Elias Kor, then war shall live forever, and humanity does not lose wars. The galaxy trembled at those words. Some thought it was just anger, spoken in the pain of loss. Others, especially the older civilizations, remembered the long, bloody history of Earth. They remembered how humans had fought each other in endless wars, how they had survived against all odds, and how they always rose stronger from the ashes. The fire had been lit, and though no one yet knew it, the death of Elias Kor was not just the end of a life. It was the spark of something far greater, something far darker. The galaxy had struck down a man of peace. In return, it had awakened the wrath of mankind. The news of Elias Kor's assassination hit Earth like a meteor crashing into the ocean. Cities that had always pulsed with life fell silent. Lights dimmed in homes, on streets, and across orbiting space stations. In schools, children sat quietly, staring at the screens that broadcast the terrible image of humanity's diplomat lying, lifeless on the steps of the Galactic Council. Grief settled like a heavy fog across the planet. For hours, it seemed the entire world had stopped breathing. People wept openly in streets, offices, and public squares. They did not cry only for Elias Kor. They cried for what he represented, the hope that humans could rise above fear, above hatred, and become a force for peace in a galaxy that had long forgotten the meaning of trust. But grief is a double-edged sword. It pierces the heart, yes, but it also ignites something far stronger: fury. A fire that burns through sadness and settles into determination. And the humans, more than any other race, were never short of determination. Across the globe, the leaders of Earth, Luna, and the colonies held emergency sessions. They gathered in silence at first, then spoke with a shared resolve. The words they chose would echo across space. The galaxy has struck at the heart of humanity. Our ambassador has been killed. This was not an act of diplomacy. It was an act of war. Let it be known, if peace dies with Elias Kor, then humanity will ensure that war lives without end. And we do not lose wars. The statement spread instantly, faster than any fleet or transmission. Other civilizations reacted with shock, confusion, and, in some cases, fear. Humans, the galaxy thought, were a species of talk and idealism. But these words were not idealistic. They carried the weight of a history filled with survival, resilience, and endless conflict. Humans did not forgive easily, and the galaxy was about to learn that lesson in full. In orbital stations above Earth, Terran fleets that had once patrolled quietly along the borders now readied themselves for action. Ships that had spent decades as silent watchers now hummed with power and purpose. Thousands of engineers and soldiers worked in unison, preparing for a mission that no one yet fully understood, except that it would be relentless. The colonies, too, answered the call. Miners on Ceres left their drills. Farmers on Mars abandoned their fields. Citizens of Europa gathered in their towns and villages, not in mourning alone, but with a shared sense of mission. Humanity was rising, and it was rising together. Yet the galaxy remained unaware of the storm that was coming. Many races dismissed the Terran statement as the noise of anger, the fleeting reaction of grief. They assumed that humanity would lament, perhaps strike back in a measured way, and then return to negotiation. They were wrong. Humanity's grief had transformed into something more profound. It was not just mourning, it was purpose. The loss of Elias Kor, the man of peace, had become a rallying cry. Every human, whether in a distant space colony or on the surface of Earth, understood that this was a turning point. To avenge peace, they would wield the full force of their will. And so, humans began to move. Diplomatic channels were sealed, where necessary. Intelligence units scoured the stars for signs of the assassin and his supporters. Fleets mobilized silently at first, and then with undeniable visibility, as if to warn the galaxy. Do not test us. Do not underestimate the wrath of those who have lost what they loved most. On Earth, memorials were built in seconds, thanks to advanced holographic technology. Children and adults alike placed messages for Elias Kor, small gestures that combined grief and defiance. The human population united in an extraordinary moment of collective resolve. Their tears were not weakness. Their tears were fuel. Meanwhile, on distant planets, the message spread like wildfire. Other races began to feel it, the unique, unyielding nature of humans. Some were afraid, others admired, though in secret, and a few plotted quietly, wondering if they had misjudged the species that had once been considered young, naive, and fragile. The Terran High Command made their intentions clear. They would hunt the assassin. They would strike the networks and allies who had orchestrated the murder. And most importantly, they would ensure that the galaxy understood the cost of harming a human diplomat. For Elias Kor's death was not the end. It was the beginning of a war unlike any the stars had seen, a war that would not be measured in months or years, but in generations. The humans, fueled by loss, had become something the galaxy could no longer ignore. And somewhere in the hidden corridors of the Galactic Council, representatives of distant empires whispered among themselves. They spoke of fear, of strategy, of whether they could survive a species that would turn grief into fire, and fire into an unending storm. On Earth, a mother told her child, "Remember his name. Remember what he stood for, and never doubt that humans will fight for what is right." In the colonies, workers, soldiers, and ordinary citizens alike repeated the same sentiment, feeling the words as a pledge, a promise, and a warning. The galaxy had made its choice by killing Elias Kor. Humanity had made its choice in response. Grief had become fire, and fire spreads faster than light. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy listened, though not all with